of the world. Oh my people, seek the truth, avoid the evil, learn Yahweh's ways. Torah Life.
Hello everybody, it's Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries. And we're just getting ready here on the road, doing a lot of talks. And we're excited because we're going to do the Torah portion right now for the next week. And you can check this out in Deuteronomy 21:10 to 25:19. That's this week's Torah portion. And it's called When You Go Out. And again, this is Yahweh coming towards the end of the Torah because the new cycle is going to start soon as the Sukkot comes upon us and the fall feast. Then we start over again in the beginning in Bereshit and Genesis. But we're going to get through the last couple of readings of this week. And it's so important to read the guidelines and the instructions of our Creator if you truly want to understand what all the scriptures say. You see, when Yeshua was going around teaching in the synagogues and the temples every day, as it says, and when Paul the Apostle was going around teaching, when all the apostles were teaching, the disciples were teaching, and all the people were teaching, they were all teaching out of the Torah. The Torah means guidelines and instructions. And this week's Torah and guidelines and instructions, I always tell people they got to be careful of the paradox of choice. You know what the paradox of choice is? The paradox of choice is, well, there's too many choices, so people don't know what to do. So instead of doing something that's wise, they do something that's popular. But what's popular is not always right, and what's right is not always popular. Am I talking too slow for you? That's the problem. That's what's happening. The paradox of choice. And that's what's going on in the world. You could take everything from food to religion and everything in between. There's too many choices. So people don't know what to do. The paradox of choice. But we look at it, I made my choice. I'm going to eat the foods our Creator gave us, and I'm going to, appreciate our Creator who gave it to us. Who gave them to us. And He gave us His Word, and He told us what to do, and He gave us His guidelines and instructions, and they are found in the Torah. And all the places around, all the Jewish synagogues all over the world will read the Torah on the Shabbat. And we're going to study them all week till we get to the Shabbat. Then you can discuss about it with everybody. But we'll look at what it says this week. Because we talk about paradox of choice. This week's Torah has more, they call it mitzvahs, more commandments, more things that Yahweh told us to do than any other week. It's like He's been, taking this whole cycle all the way from Genesis and all the way through all the other books, the first 5 books of the Torah, until He comes up here towards the end and He says, you know what? I've been telling you these things, now I'm going to lay it on you. Now I'm going to give you them all, not just some. I'm giving you, there's so many more this week than ever before. And we possibly can't go through them all because we only got 10 minutes here on YouTube. But we're going to get through them. We're going to get through some of the important ones here. The first one talks about, and I quote this all the time, is about keeping the root pure. Keeping the root pure. And it says over and over again, whoever does things that will destroy the root, one way or another, is detestable to Yahweh. We must find ways to get rid of all wickedness among you. So we have to get rid of all wickedness among us. Now what is wickedness? Well, wickedness to Yahweh is not the same thing to the world. Wickedness to the world is different than what's wickedness to Yahweh. Wickedness to Yahweh is what most of the world is doing today. That's why it says we're not to be like the world. We're supposed to be set apart. Wickedness are the things that Torah says we shouldn't be doing. The things that Torah says is sin. Yahweh has a different plan for us, and Yahweh tells us what to do. But this week it was really about getting rid of wickedness, not doing those things or not thinking the way those people think. And we look at it here. We talk about where does it start? Well, we have to understand that everything starts with our minds, with our training, with our teaching as we're growing up. And if our parents are wicked, we're going to be wicked. Or if our parents are doing wicked things, we're going to do wicked things because we imitate them. When we grow up, we think like them. So it warns us in the scriptures to teach our children the Torah, the guidelines and instructions of our Creator Yahweh. But what happens when people don't do that? Well, when people don't do that, our kids are not growing up with a good foundation. And they're going to grow up doing wicked things, thinking they're okay. And that's the problem we have today. We have a whole world doing these things that are wicked. But the real problem is they think it's okay. It's one thing to do wicked things and know they're wicked. But it's another thing to do wicked things and think they're okay. And that's a deception of the enemy. He wants us to think what we're doing is okay when it isn't. And that's a problem. And where does it start? It starts with our children. And in the scriptures it tells us this week's Torah. It tells us this week in Deuteronomy 25:18 all the way to Deuteronomy 25:21. If you have a rebellious child, a child that is disobeying their parents and a child that is not being corrected through discipline, you ought to bring him to the elders. And if the elders cannot reach that kid, you have to take that kid out and stone him. And all the elders will stone him, will put him to death. Why? Because it says here clearly, you must put an end to such wickedness among you, and all Israel will hear about it and be afraid. So they had to set an example and not let anyone be disobedient, because, you know, usually if our kids are disobedient, it has something to do with the parents. But that's not always the case. Sometimes there are parents that try their hardest to get their kid okay, but that kid's corrupted because he's watching TV, because he's hanging out with some bad people, because he's reading some bad books, because he's thinking all these bad things. But when he has good things in his life to guide him, like the Torah, it's very seldom that he would be one of these rebellious children. So Yahweh's been telling us all throughout, we must destroy the root. We must get rid of the things that are creating the problem. Now, I'm not condoning stoning your kids. Some of the kids out there can use a good stoning, but I'm not condoning that. I'm just telling you what the scriptures say. We must separate, divide, and we must put an end to such wickedness among us. And what here is Yahweh calling us wicked is wicked. He's calling a rebellious child wicked. And in the scripture, Yeshua said it very well, and it said it right there in the commandments. You must honor thy mother and the father. A rebellious child is wicked according to Yahweh. That's the bottom line. And we have to deal with it. And Yahweh has his ways of dealing with it. But, you know, we have to get right, and we have to see that this is corrupting the future. When these kids are walking around, if they're rebellious to their parents, don't you think they're going to be rebellious to the world and any authority in the world? Well, Yahweh says we got to put an end to that, and we got to set an example before it continues to get worse. It goes on to say a lot of other things in this week's Torah, and one of the things I quote all the time is I do a lecture about modesty. How important is it to be modest? And in this week, in one of the many things it tells us in this week's Torah, it says in Deuteronomy 22:5, a woman is not to wear a man's clothing, and a man is not to put on a woman's clothing. For whoever does these things is a detestable thing to Yahweh. You know, so he wants us to have our own roles. And this is really about roles. We have to look, you know, the way Yahweh wanted us to look. A man is supposed to look a certain way and a woman is supposed to look a certain way. But it's really about our roles. Yahweh says a woman is supposed to do these things. A man is supposed to do these things. They come together in unity under Yahweh. And they grow and they build together. And then they bring up children that are righteous together because they're following Yahweh's word. And that's it. But today we have a big problem today, and it doesn't look like it's getting any better because we live more against Yahweh's words than ever before. And again, Yahweh says what's detestable to him, and he tells us how to get right with these things. And he tells us over and over again in his scriptures, and this Torah this week, it says it many times. It says, this way you must put an end to the detestable things or to such wickedness among you. Over and over again, Yahweh expresses it in this week's Torah. It really comes down to everyone about the clean versus the unclean. And Yahweh says, and he says it again in this week's Torah, that nothing should be unclean among you. Everything that's detestable, everything that's wicked in Yahweh's eyes should be wicked in our eyes. We should hate the things he hates and love the things he loves. That's what we got to understand, and that's what we have to do. Again, Deuteronomy 24:7 says, you know, we put an end to such wickedness among you. You do me a favor. You go and look at this week's Torah and look how many times he says that. Put an end to the wickedness among you. That's what we got to do. Everybody out there, if you want to be healthy, you know, diet is wonderful, but there's many more things to it. But the real answer to being healthy is putting an end to such wickedness among you. The wickedness is the way the world thinks. The wickedness is the way people just are thinking in their flesh. We got to be like Yahweh and think like Yahweh so we can put all wickedness away from us. Alright everybody, this is Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries. Every week I do the Torah portion and also the half Torah portion now, which we're going to start warming up and get ready for the next year's cycle. But you know, we're going to have great times coming among us. Feast of Tabernacles is coming up. And we've been looking at thinking, well, where we're going, and people are celebrating at it 2 times this year. Well, the first one I'm going to be in Texas for 2 days. Then I'm going to be in North Florida, in Lake City, Florida. Then I'm going to be in South Carolina, Yahweh, and I'm going to get to all those places. And then I'm going to be back in Texas in October again for Feast of Tabernacles. So I highly recommend it. Just check out Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, the fall feast that Yahweh commands us to obey, and it's going to be a great time. All right, everybody, we'll be back later this week with the Haftorah. Have a great day, have a great Shabbat next week, and we'll see you again soon.
Come out of the world, oh my people, seek the truth, avoid the evil, learn Yahweh's ways.